Yeah, so now.
Yeah. So do you hear me talking now? Okay. I'll keep doing it anyways. It's a hobby. Wait, I hear myself on this. So do you hear me talking now? Oh, yeah, I see myself now.
Okay, listen. Listen, everybody, we are live. No, we are live. Oh, is this not the right microphone?
No, it's that microphone.
Okay, hang on. We're about to switch out microphones here. You probably can't hear most of what I'm saying, but we're live. I knew my
We
sunglasses
are
were live.
live. We need sunglasses.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm indoor sunglasses kind of weird.
All right, that sounds so.
Let's see. So I know that we're on the gram. We're on the gram. We're on the YouTube. People are like, do you hear me talking? Okay. And now, Canuto. Canuto is this guy's name. He said his name is Sergio, but his nickname is Canuto.
Canuto.
And where we come from, we go by nicknames. We do nicknames. By the way, you should keep this mic so that you can intervene and say things when you feel like it. I don't want you to feel pressured, but when you feel like it, you can say what you want to say.
As long as they're inappropriate.
As you can say inappropriate stuff on this podcast. As far as I'm concerned, we're in our infancy, so nobody's really watching us yet. But the whole idea is that, as we grow, we will become known for the inappropriate things that were said in the infancy stage.
And then you have to delete it all and then apologize.
But you're gonna delete it, and then somebody is gonna go back and find it anyway, and they're gonna find it, and they're gonna incriminate you for the things that you said that you really didn't know were that big of a deal when you said them. You know what do you think about that, Canuto? Yeah, he's firing up his mic.
We are.
He's going Donald Trump on his mic here. Donald, you're fired.
Well, you know that the internet kind of never forgets anything, right?
The internet never forgets anything.
Ever.
Unfortunately, that's true.
And it is what it is. But in a way, I hope that everything that I say in general, if it were to be broadcasted live, would be okay. You know what I mean? But I don't think that that's the case with anybody.
No, I make lots of I say a lot of stupid things that I regret, and I'm glad that the world doesn't record it.
When you regret them, like when you look back on things that you've said and you think, wow, that was a mild case of social discalibration.
Right.
What does that regret feel like?
It's like a convulsion.
I know exactly what you mean, actually. I don't want to be too like revealing, but I experience that sometimes where I'm just driving and I'll be like, why did I say that thing that I said 5 years ago?
I know, 5 years ago, right? Like nobody cares, but yeah.
I'm really glad that.
But you do.
I'm really glad that someone else has experienced that, because at first I thought, like, as I get older, I think, do I need to get like checked up on my neurological health?
Right.
Why don't you change that camera angle, by the way, just to something, you know what I mean? Change it periodically. But yeah, I think about, do I need to get checked up because I experience these periodic convulsions when I think about dumbass things that I've said. And now I'm thinking, like, actually, that's just a normal part of this generation, in part because we are so accustomed to being reminded of the dumbass things that we say.
Yeah, there's a lot of shame in our culture.
A lot of shame. A lot of shame. Well, I hope that we don't have to feel ashamed about the lack of technical prowess in this podcast that we are doing right here. I think that we're doing, that's the camera. Are we going to change the camera?
We're putting it
angle?
together. Yeah, I thought so too.
I'm a little bit out of frame. On the gram, I'm like, you can only see this half of my face. Yeah.
It's like a 30-second
But I think
delay.
that's kind of
People
funny,
see
though.
your prettiness.
You know, I'm like the mysterious guy. You're like in frame, and you're like sitting there like, who is this guy?
No, man, I'm enjoying myself
Right on.
in this cold room.
Right on. So, okay, this is a podcast. This is the MI101 podcast. MI stands for music industry. The idea of this podcast is to create a space where music and industry can be discussed by people who are on both sides of that equation. So we get people who are musicians and people who are part of the music industry in whatever capacity that may be, and we get them to talk. And so today, I'm here with Zeke. Zeke, introduce yourself.
Hey, I will not introduce myself, I guess. Oh, do? Okay. Yeah, man, I live out in Jingletown. I play the bass. I like to play at different warehouse parties, house parties, kind of wherever anybody wants music. Where people want to dance, that's where I like to play.
Where people want to dance and where people want music. That's where you like. That sounds like a musician to me. Definitely a musician.
Well, that's the only, why else do it, right? Like, why get on a stage and perform for nobody, or I guess yourself? I mean, the community is, I think, what music has always been about.
Like, more than anything, the reason that you do what you do is because you enjoy the act of playing music. The feeling of that sort of like visceral telepathy that you get with the people that you're playing with.
Yeah.
Right? When you're like, you're playing the bass and you lock in really good with the drummer, you kind of live for that feeling. And then you live for that feeling of when you've locked in with the audience, right?
Yeah, life is a team sport.
Life is a team sport. I mean, so then I would call you a musician. And the reason that I say that is just because last week we were talking with a different group of people, and the other guy, Nawel, who was with us, he asked this question that then I thought about, and he was like, how do you draw the distinction between someone who's a musician, and someone who's in the music industry? Because in a way, all of us who are musicians are in some way in contact with the industry, right? We're trying to make a living. You're trying to make a living so that you can continue to do that, right? And at the same time, the industry itself, there are people who are not really thinking about how do I make music more. They're thinking about how do I make more money off of whatever music is being made, whether I'm making it or somebody else is making it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's... But you need all kinds of people.
Right.
And you need that kind of person, right? You need somebody who's organized. You need somebody who's just a little whack, just living on a different planet. It helps create creativity.
Mm.
I think in order to have success, everybody needs to have their own unique skill. And one person whose job is nothing more than trying to figure out financial success, I think that's not a bad thing.
And it would be great if that person would team up with musicians to help them execute their dream or their artistry and get paid for it, or create business around it.
I totally agree.
Yeah. And but that's then the distinction, because I think that like there are people who exclusively are in it for the continuation of that feeling of community and the creation of community around their art. And that's what's important to them. That's why they get up in the morning. And then there are other people, and I would venture to say that the people who are in the music industry, most of them started because they picked up an instrument and started playing it. You know what I mean? They were a part of a band, or they wanted to be in a band. They always wanted to play music, and then they never really got to the point where they were going to be able to do it full time. And so eventually they were like, well, let me become a manager, or let me become a designer, or let me become, a concert promoter or something.
Yeah.
Because I like going to shows. But those people then kind of remove themselves or lose that perspective of somebody who would be like, yeah, the main thing that I want to do is play music, and I want to connect with that audience that is there in front of me,
To create a moment in time
Totally.
that seems to have no time, that you kind of exist in this presence, and there's a time happening around you and you're just flowing with it. You're not controlling it or fighting it. I think that at the end of the day is the feeling I look for, and I think that's the feeling a lot of people look for. And I think audiences actually look for that too, because when they feel the band not as 5 people, but as one person with 10 arms, then you can sense that somehow in your heart.
Yeah. I mean, everybody can feel it. Everybody in the room can feel the connection with a musician that is really tapping into whatever that collective moment is. And like, if you have lights and you have video projections and you have like thousands of other people that are also tapping into it, it feels that much bigger, right? But essentially it all kind of boils down to the chemistry between, or even the personal passion and execution of like a solo artist, right? Just being on the stage right there and being able to put something out that is drawing everybody's attention.
Yeah.
So, okay, here's a question that I have in this vein, in this line of what we're talking about. You don't have to say how much, but I'm curious, what was your highest paying ever gig? Right? Like what was it like? What were the circumstances? What was the highest paid gig that you ever did?
I think it was a really large church service.
Huh. Church, what kind of church?
It was one of these mega churches, like the super Lutheran churches, and I think it was Easter, and they wanted a horn section. Okay. And I went and I sat in on that.
Wait, what did you play when you sat in there?
Trombone.
Okay, so you play trombone, you play bass, you play multiple instruments then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, used to play. I gave it up a while back.
You're rusty at the trombone.
Very rusty.
The rusty-ass trombone.
Yeah. But, that was the best gig. But, I'm not... I'm independent. I don't need to play for money. And my goal in life is to get people together who are either too uncomfortable to play, or people that, I don't know, that aren't going to make the initiative on their own to go find a place to play, and then try to make a community where people kind of feel at home. And there's a lot of people around the Bay who do that, and I've always really admired a lot of them and how they can create a community that just, I don't know, it grows itself. It's contagious.
Right. And that is kind of the seed of what would happen in a quote unquote mainstream successful project too. Like if you think about, I don't know, I think about like Metallica or something. When they first started out, because they had a lot of friends that liked to go to their shows. And everybody that went to one of their shows kind of left feeling like, oh, I'm one of those guys' friends now, Right. At least while they were at a certain level. But at some point they got big enough to where they, where it was no longer that.
Right.
But as they were like getting, starting out what they ended up doing, their whole thing was they created a tribe, for lack of a better word, around who they were and the lifestyle that they lived, and people that wanted to live that lifestyle with them.
Yeah, a lot of people feel alone. Like, I think a lot of people feel alone. I think the internet's kind of exposed that there's these niche beliefs and things and desires that people have. And we've gotten to a point now where the world is very tiny. And these little tiny communities of interest have gone. There was this one of the weirder ones is the video game music, right?
Video game music. Okay, I thought you were going to say video game, like people who play video games.
Well, they got a community, but the video game music, there is this like small little niche group of people who just love that 8-bit and 16-bit sound.
Yeah.
And they go out and they create their own album delivery systems. They have their own little world, and it's all over the physical world.
Right. Man, this angle that you just had me on, I'm looking weird in like 75% of these angles, at least on the gram. At least on the gram.
Yeah,
I'm like, because I'm looking at myself here, I'm being very narcissistic and just like watching in delayed time, my mouth moving to the thing I said like 5 minutes ago or whatever this is here. And literally like, I look funny, but that's okay.
Well, do you want to move?
No.
Okay.
No, I want to look funny. I want to just look funny. I want to look as funny as Canudo over here is like willing to.
Oh, tell me about it. I'm using my headphones over here.
Yeah, but you don't have a mic. Do you have a mic?
I do have a mic.
Yeah, you should say what you're saying into the mic.
Yeah, you should.
I'm just struggling with timing here, man. I mean, timing as in the sense that I get like 3 times a delay. It's like here. That's insane. It's crazy.
Yeah,
I got a shout out right now. We have Oscar Lee Music. Oscar Lee is an incredible piano player, mostly in the Latin vein, but I have a feeling he can play anything he puts his mind to. He actually does these really awesome TikTok videos. I think he's getting big on TikTok. I just want to shout him out because I see him in the Instagram. And yeah, good on you, Oscar. I hope I get to play with you again soon. So, yeah, anyways, Canudo, you're struggling with time. You'd be a bad drummer.
Thank you, man. I'm trying to beat away.
Well, I think anybody drummer would be bad with 5-second delay.
Or somebody who like learned how to play like that, probably a master drummer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're like able to play with like a 5-second delay. That actually happened. I mean, not that, but something like that happened one time. The first time that I ever went actually to record a live streamed performance. And now like, you know, people do that all the time. They set themselves up for live streams or whatever, and record out performances because of you know what we've been dealing with the past 2 years, and how you can't like have people all join together in a room. So the very first time that I went to go do that was with this band. It was a Latin band called Calmao, which we're all familiar with, or at least Canuto and I are familiar with. You might be familiar with if you ever checked us out, but. Anyways, the point was we got together and there was like a setup where the drummer was in a different room so we could isolate the drum tracks. And they had like, in-ear monitors. And there was a delay between the monitor signal getting to them and the signal then coming back to us so that we could play along to it. And so we started like take after take with, I think that the live stream was rolling, like the cameras were rolling, everything was rolling. And literally we would start and like right away, this song would start to slow down and slow down and slow down because we were trying to play to the drummer who was trying to play to us. And it basically fizzled out into nothing each time. And we're like, whoa, we got some technical difficulties. We got to stop this. And we ended up having to stop a couple of times to figure it out. But it was kind of, it was like an interesting, situation to learn what happens in that situation.
Yeah, well, digital is tough. I've played with actually a couple of times electronic drums, and it can go great, but it can also go pretty horrible. So it's I wouldn't recommend it. But I don't know. I know a lot of people tried really hard. There was a bunch of new programs that got built for these like low latency. Let's jam together. But I mean, 5 milliseconds really ends up being a lot. Like the difference between 5 milliseconds is enough to make the bass and the drum
100%.
sound like garbage.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah, because in fact, you familiar with Adam Neely?
Yeah.
This is one of the videos that he just put out, or maybe it was one that I just recently saw. But basically, he put out a video where he was talking about how psychologists had, or like neurologists, I don't know which, neurologist or psychologist or whatever, they had tried to measure the smallest amount of time that could exist between two beats for you to perceive its latency. So
Right.
if you had like, a series of beats and then one of them was off by a certain amount, you would be still able to perceive that it was off. And it's like hundreds of a millisecond or something like that. It's really, really small.
Yeah.
You like the shift in timing that the average person can actually perceive in terms of off. So 0.5 milliseconds or whatever, that definitely sounds like enough to cause, a disruption.
Without question. Yeah, I mean, music's it's a live art. I have this computer stuff. I don't like computers, but that's me. Yeah, I do actually. But Adam Neely, he has great videos, by the way. His music theory that he does on there. He's a very sharp guy.
He is, yeah, and he's been doing that for a long time, I guess. Like the creating videos on YouTube. He really, I think he dominates that space in terms of like music related tutorials. And he's gone, into extreme depth about a lot of different subjects within music that I find very, very stimulating. Very awesome. Very cool content. Shout out to Adam Neely. I'm sure he needs the shout out from a podcast that has 2 viewers on Instagram right now. I wonder how many we have on YouTube.
It doesn't matter.
It really doesn't, but it's also just kind of fun to like check out. Okay, we have 1 viewer on YouTube. Well, no, we have a couple of viewers on YouTube, and it'd be cool if somebody commented on because whatever they comment on, I feel like. In fact, you know what? I'm going to try and get somebody to comment by sharing this on my Facebook right now, and everybody can know this is live. Yeah, I am live.
Well, caught me by surprise.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah, with Zeke. What is your Facebook so I can tag you?
Zeke.oni.
Zeke
dot ZEEK dot ONI.
ONI.
And it's the same on Instagram too, actually. So.
Okay. I guess I got it. I should be way better at Facebook than I am.
Well, it changes every month, I guess. I got off, or I tried to. I don't know. I'm addicted now. It's a problem.
Okay. I guess I did that right. But check this out. We were here last week, as I may have mentioned to you. We were here last week, and we were doing the same exact thing. We were basically trying to talk about music and industry. I was with this guy Noel, and I was with Yogi, who's coming here later for an undisclosed reason, because we're actually doing another version of this podcast. But okay, so let's just forget I said that.
Yeah,
that
I forgot already.
But basically, yeah, we were here together, and we got on the subject of Spotify. Yeah. And the reason that came up was because, let me see. The reason that came up was because basically, somebody was saying, well, I feel like it's unfair that Spotify only pays whatever it is, 0.004 cents per stream that they pay. And then I got a comment from someone. I'm not going to say their name because maybe that's going to be like, uncool. But they basically said, let me see. Let's not give Spotify a platform for discussion since they've already ripped off tons of musicians. You talk about how there is now a system the system that there is now is better than the system before streaming existed. However, there's another system, which is Bandcamp.
Yeah.
That is different because people can buy one song from you and you make money directly from what your supporters want to give. Last month, this person in particular was talking about, last month I made $500. And I think that that's good for an independent musician. How many streams do you need to get $500?
0.8 of a penny per like stream. So I don't know. I'm not going to do the math, but it's a lot. But then again, it's like this, there's a Starbucks everywhere, right?
Go on.
And Starbucks is not the best coffee in the world.
By no means.
Okay, but it's there.
Right.
And so there's a whole bunch of people who can get something that's slightly better than what they had before. Now, if you go back like 10 years ago, everyone was just stealing music, right? So they were getting paid nothing.
Right. So that is actually the principal point that I like to that I like to think about when we're making this judgment. Because, like, especially like over the past couple of months, but you type about Spotify or something on social media, people like are very opinionated about how Spotify is like the worst thing in the world. And the same way you would with Starbucks, like I would feel kind of embarrassed to be the one that's saying like, actually Spotify is great or whatever, because like if you were like, yeah, Starbucks is awesome, like I don't think that most people around here would want to be your friend,
No, probably.
But exactly what you're saying kind of reminds me of the fact that, yeah, like in 2002, 3, 4, whatever it was, you didn't have streaming services. You had file sharing services.
Right.
And with file sharing, you could just share music with hundreds or thousands of people, and they would pay nothing, and there would be no tracking of who was listening to it. There would be no, like, you as an artist would have no idea who is listening to your music, let alone getting paid anything for it. And so, some of it comes down to how much can Spotify really charge the people that subscribe to that service, because if they made it beyond a certain threshold of expensive, then those people would just be like, I'm just going to file share.
Yeah, like the iTunes model.
Right. Exactly. I mean, iTunes, and iTunes is great, but I've never used it personally before. I've never, I think I bought like maybe in total 10 songs ever on iTunes. And now every time I like turn on my car, one song that is still downloaded on my phone is always the one that comes on. Right. And so now I hate that song, even though it's like a Miles Davis song, and I love that song, but I kind of hate the fact that my car, like every time it starts up, that's what it is, Right. And but anyways, so the point is like, yeah, so you have the iTunes model, and then you have the Bandcamp model, which is what this person was bringing up. Do you have any music on Bandcamp?
No, but I agree with it, right? If somebody, because fans, if they're a fan,
yeah,
right, someone wants to give you money.
Right.
Like people go out and they give money to things that they care about. And when that Bandcamp, I feel, has given them a mechanism.
So that's true, but having your music also available on other streaming services that don't, allow for that option.
Right.
How does that detract from the possibility of somebody contributing to you on Bandcamp? It's like, it seems to me it's all additive, right? It's all like cumulative.
Yeah, that's what I think too, right? One is going, Spotify allows you to find people that you would, there's some of these algorithms, right? They do find a way to give you music that you would never think to look for.
Right.
Things that are interesting and you would enjoy, but you could never stumble upon.
Right. So Bandcamp is not doing that.
Exactly.
Right? Yes. Right.
But once you find them, and if you really like them, then you can go give them money.
Although, you know what? Okay, I say that, and I realize I just stuck my foot in my mouth, because, in fact, I do have one song on Bandcamp that just about like every 2 months or so, somebody buys. And I don't know how they found it. I don't know what they did. Like, I basically, like, I looked into it one time, and because like every so often I get like $3 in my PayPal, and it's just like 2 people bought your song or whatever. And I'm really curious, because I'm like, where did they find that? I'm not doing anything with that song, or like, like putting it out there.
Right.
And somehow it's getting recommended alongside other artists that don't even sound similar to that, but for some reason are perceived to be within the same vibe. And so I'm getting, shout out to those 2 or 3 people a month that buy that song. But it's like, so Bandcamp does in some way do that, which is good. I'm glad that they do. The one thing that I would have a bone to pick with Bandcamp about, and this inherently has to do with the difference between those models, all right? This is like the bad thing about Bandcamp. They are a royalty-free platform. So because you're selling the music directly to your customer or whatever, your listener, your fan, it doesn't generate a royalty, right? And the reason that that's significant is because if, let's say you play bass on somebody's record, right? And you alter the bass line from what they had originally composed in some kind of way where they are like, hey, I should give you a percentage of the song. Let's say they're really transparent about it. They're like, I'm going to give you 10% of the publishing on this song. So that every time I sell it, technically you should get 10% of that. Or every time it gets streamed on whatever service, you should get 10% of that. Spotify is tracking that information, or at least your distributor that sent the song to Spotify is tracking that information. Bandcamp is not. So you could, that same artist that said that they would give you that, they can go on Bandcamp and they can sell this song, let's say they could sell millions of times and they make millions of dollars. And you were supposed to get 10,000 or, whatever, 100,000 of that $1 million that they made off of Bandcamp. And you're not going to get anything. You know what I mean? Unless they decide to pay you out the percentages.
So who's supposed to pay? I'm sorry, I'm slightly not following. Who's paying out the money?
Well, so the royalty payments that whenever you put out a song, there's like there's two components to the value of that song. There's the master recording, and then there's the publishing. And the master recording has specifically to do with that song, that version of the song, like the actual stuff that you recorded, right?
Right.
And then the publishing has to do with the idea behind it. So the idea that, the lyrics and the melody and the song structure or whatever it is, all of that correspond to intellectual property that gets published when you put out the song. So now, when you put a song out on Spotify, there's a reason that you can't just upload it yourself. You have to go through a distributor. You have to go through like CD Baby on the lowest end, or you go through DistroKid or TuneCore, or you go through whatever, a record label, whoever does it, they send it to Spotify. And the reason for that is so that the information about everybody that contributed to that intellectual property is tracked by that distributor, such that every time a payout happens for that song through your distributor, you will automatically get paid that money. So when Spotify is paying out the artist, they're dishing out cash for all these streams, or pennies for all these streams, right? A fraction of that penny is taken by the distributor and it's divided up amongst all the people that contributed to that song. So in answer to your question, who's paying for it? Spotify is paying for it.
Okay.
Or if PBS decides to license that song into one of their documentaries or something, and they're going to say, I'm going to pay out a $500 payment for using that song, then the 10% that you were supposed to get for playing that bass line in that song, it's going to go to your distributor, and that distributor is going to go through what's called a performance royalty organization, ASCAP or BMI, and there's a few others. And they are going to say, okay, this song was registered as, Zeke Oni. Oni's your last name?
Sir.
Let's just say it is. Okay, Zeke Oni played the bass for that section of the song and therefore has 10% of it. He's supposed to get this, this fraction of whatever that payment was. And technically that should always be happening for as long as that song is out there. And even if somebody records a cover of the song, the intellectual property is still what's owned by the people who originally came up with it. So you would still own the publishing on that.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
But Bandcamp is like none of that.
They don't protect. So anybody could come in and like take your song and then upload it again and then sell it under their own account. Is that?
I mean, technically, yes, that could happen. Although Bandcamp does make you like check a box that says you do own this material, and if they catch you doing that, you technically. But you could, in theory, sell the song until they catch you, right? And then they catch you, and then then you don't have any recourse. I mean, I'm saying that, but of course you would have some kind of recourse. Of course you could sue the person or whatever,
But is it worth it? I mean, I don't know. But there's a lot of motivations for why people do things. There's some people, that's what they want. Like they want fame and they want money, and they're going to spend a bunch of their mental cycles trying to identify every 0.8 of a penny that they might have lost or something like this, right? And if they're going to spend their time like that, they're going to end up broke. And they're probably not going to have any time to do anything productive.
Right.
So at the end of the day, the world is whatever it is. And you just got to live in it. And that's what we have. Right now, we have Spotify. That's better than Kazaa and Napster and Direct Connect.
Right.
We have Bandcamp for people who want it. But yeah, it's a lot harder to go find a CD that you might be interested in. It's certainly a lot harder to find a record.
Right. Yeah. And I would argue, too, that if you had, like, like let's say we existed still in the age of CDs and records, and you wanted to go out there and just crush the world. You wanted to sell 1 million records, right?
Sure.
You can't really do that until you've printed and shipped and packaged 1 million records.
Yeah.
And that itself, assuming they cost like, let's say $2 per record, you gotta have a couple $1 million up front to be able to sell a couple million records and make that money back, right? So it's almost like the option of selling your music in all territories simultaneously would have only been available to people that have millions of dollars worth of funding up front to be able to do that. And now you can kind of click a button, upload it to Bandcamp, and it's basically available to anybody who, no matter where in the world they live.
Yeah, it was the vinyl records, right?
Yeah.
So it was Adele's recent album. I think she did it on vinyl. And then she basically sucked up by herself like 80 or 95% of all the record production in the country.
Oh, right. Yeah, because there's this huge backlog in printing vinyl, actually. Like if you...
It's all Adele's fault. she made a good album.
Damn,
and now
Adele, yeah, she did she made an amazing album, and then everybody wants to buy it, and good for her.
Yeah.
Now the production capacity of the vinyl pressing industry is probably a lot lower than what it would have been, back when like Winger were putting out albums.
Winger. Okay, yeah.
Guns N' Roses were making their albums. They would do the same thing, and then Winger would be like, "Man, I can't find a place to put my album." Shout out to Winger. I'm sure they're still filling up like larger places than I'm filling up. But
for at least 20 more years.
Yeah. No, I mean, Winger has like a bright career ahead of them. They're, willing to not compare what they can do now to what they were able to do back in the day.
Right.
But, okay, so let's not talk about Winger anymore. I don't want to disparage. I don't want to disparage any musician ever.
Of course not.
And I think Winger is actually, they had their day in the sun, and like really good for them. But they're exactly the point is like, so, okay, they'd be a good way of making another point, too. And that's what streaming can do for legacy artists that the vinyl industry wouldn't be able to do.
Yeah, you just saw Fleetwood Mac. That's when was that song? The do I can't remember that. The one with the guy on the skateboard. Right. So this guy rides a skateboard to a Fleetwood Mac song, and then all of a sudden the whole world needs to hear this song.
Right.
And they all go straight to Spotify.
Right. So and his numbers go up right away. And you think about like, well, if the only way that people could consume Fleetwood Mac would be buying records of theirs, I would argue that they'd likely make significantly less money than they do now, considering that people can basically go on Spotify and they can listen to Fleetwood Mac whenever they want. They can send the link to their friend, on a text message or whatever, and their friend can start listening to it. They could do a lot of things basically that otherwise would be prohibited by just the technology. And every time they do that, Fleetwood Mac is going to get a micropayment. So, take MC Hammer, for example. MC Hammer, I think, I checked this recently one time, but I think he gets like 4 million streams on Spotify per month.
What?
Yeah, totally. Of the songs that he recorded 30, 40 years ago or whatever.
That's a lot.
Yeah, so by the calculations of, like an eyeball calculation based on the micropayment that they make, you'd be getting like 16 grand a month or something like that off of those 4 million streams.
Yeah.
And you could argue like living in the Bay Area, that is good money or bad money. I don't know. I don't make any kind of money like that. So if I had 16 grand a month, I'd be very happy.
I think you're doing all right at that point.
At that point, right.
I think so.
But I guarantee you he would not be making that kind of money if the only way that people could consume his music were by buying CDs. Because who would go in and buy an MC Hammer CD?
Nobody.
Yeah, or like maybe a few people would, but like
you'll find it at the dollar store. Like or like
don't disparage MC Hammer though.
I'm not, but I mean like that's the kind of album that's going to end up in one of those bins,
right? And
you're like, oh wow, that's in there, and then maybe you'll get it.
And at the point that it ends up in the dollar store too, you're not getting paid anything because somebody bought it. It's like it's being resold.
Yeah.
Right. And there's another thing. So every time you listen to something on Spotify, that artist gets that micropayment. Whereas, you buy your Black Sabbath record in 1975, you paid $10 for it. Black Sabbath got $1 for it, like if the math works that way. And then every time you spun that record, and every time your kid spun that record, and every time you put it on at a barbecue, and every time your uncle then was just like, smoking pot behind behind whatever, and then said, hey, let's listen to this together, blah, blah, blah. And, all of those moments happen, and they're great, and vinyl is cool, but nobody else got paid for that time. They only got paid that one time. You know what I mean? Whereas now Black Sabbath is getting paid every time somebody streams their song. I find that significant.
To bring another point on the Spotify thing, I'll talk. Down the street, there's in Berkeley here, there's an audiophile store, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've ever gone in there.
No.
But they've got speakers like you couldn't believe, like a $60,000 set of speakers and a $20,000 stereo receiver with these super low impedance drivers and amps on these things, and when you're streaming music off the internet, everybody has designed that. Okay, everyone's listening to a Sonos or a headphones or something with a high impedance thing. So I'll say one of the downsides, actually, or upsides maybe for Bandcamp, because they have FLAC. Spotify, it's compressed. If you have a nice stereo system, it actually doesn't sound that good. The better audio quality is low impedance. And I don't think anybody cares. But I mean, I care. But I don't think most people care. But I think there is a trend of people going out and buying vinyl for that exact reason. People want computers out of their ears to a certain degree.
Yeah, that is a really good point, because nowadays, and everybody's life looks different. I don't know if your life looks like this, but a lot of people's lives are like all day on Zoom.
Yeah.
And they're like on Zoom all day, and they've got their earbuds in, and they're listening to that, like really like digitalized thing. People are listening to this right now. 3 people are listening to this right now, and they're hearing our voices on these Apple like earbuds or whatever, or maybe they're listening with what is it, Raytheon?
Raycon.
Raycon, yeah. Raycon, because we want Raycon to sponsor this podcast. So they're listening to it on Raycon earpods. And but whatever, they're probably tired of that sound like right in their ears, right? And when you listen to music for pleasure, or you want to chill out and just like you want to put something on that has a little bit more of like an organic quality to it. And almost nothing on Spotify is going to have that quality, because even if it's a recording from that era, it's still going to be going through your phone, which is connected to Bluetooth, which is Bluetoothing it out to some speakers that are produced in the past 5 years by a sonic standard that is completely different from what existed at the time. That people used those kinds of speakers that you're talking about.
Right. So, like, have you ever opened up I think Bose started all this. But have you ever opened up a Bose speaker and looked how it works?
No.
Okay, so like when you got a regular speaker, like you go back to the 70s and you go to your grandpa's stereo system, right? It's got like a giant 12 or a 14-inch speaker. Then it's got a mid-range. It might have a third mid-range depending on how it's scaled, and then they'll have a little tweeter or something. But it's got a big membrane that's actually vibrating the sound. But in the modern speakers, that's not what they do. They get a bunch of really low quality speakers and they put them in a gate. So there's just a bunch of really tiny speakers. And then what they do is they use a computer to phase shift the sound that's coming out of each one of those so that they can create a synthetic speaker that would have the same properties of a real speaker, because it's cheaper to build. So that's kind of how things have gone. But no matter what, if you have a little cone, right? I don't care what sort of gate array logic you use. It's still going to have a maximum vibration capability.
Right.
And you can synthesize things, and it might fool a lot of people. But like, it's like you feel the bass in your butt. Yeah. You know what I mean? You can't feel the bass in your butt with a fake speaker system.
Right. Yeah. Now let me ask you a question though. Is there anything about the way music is produced now that is attenuated or is accommodating that kind of a setup versus the setup that we used to have, where you have drivers and low impedance kind of things, and music was produced in a more analog fashion, so it going through those speakers sounded a particular way. And now music is mainly produced through digital means, and people creating beats or recording through digitized methods of production. You know what I mean? Like the method of actually producing the music is different. So does the music of now sound better on the speaker system of now, and the music of yesterday sounds better on the speaker system of yesterday? Or does all music simply sound better in the previous way, and then we're just like kind of, like just dealing with lower quality in our consumption of music?
I'm not a producer, right? And there's a lot of things I don't understand in that. I have noticed that dynamic range has decreased a lot. I have noticed that compression has pushed everything to like this maximal volume. Mm-hmm. Because if you're on the radio, or let's say it's on the radio, right?
Right.
It's like the commercials. The commercials were always a little bit louder than the show. Uh-huh. And that's because people they hear louder, they pay attention. Mm. So if your song, for example, was on the radio and you came up and your song was quiet, yeah, maybe they'll turn it up, but there's an equal chance they'll just change the channel. Mm. And I think it's pushed people in a direction to create music that caters for people to keep listening. I remember a Subway radio. Mm. You know the Subway sandwiches, right? They have their own radio station.
Really?
And they remix all of the songs in remix all the EQing, or I should say they remaster the songs. They change the EQ. They might slow down or speed it up or change the pitch, because they've had some psychologists do an analysis on how these different songs affect people.
Like they make them hungry when they go inside their store or something?
You want to least offensive, I think, is the objective.
Got it.
And so they've crafted these things. And so if you're trying to be successful, of course you have to do this, right? I mean, you listen to the K-pop, you know, and the way that the K-pop is like perfectly tuned to these I don't know, human instincts, like these elements that they're native to your body, and they're just being exploited by the producers.
I love that we consider it exploited versus like, versus they're creating music that was just like irresistible to us or something, you know. But it's funny that you mentioned K-pop. Actually, my wife is Korean, and I don't know that she's necessarily a particular K-pop fan, but she basically loves that K-pop has become such a big thing in the world, and it kind of represents Korea in a very positive way because, she's, Koreans in general are kind of like nationalistic and love to feel like something Korean is looked at as amazing by the rest of the world. When I was a little kid, like Taekwondo was like the thing you had to do, and everybody was proud of that. Now it's K-pop, and K-pop is a really interesting thing.
And that's great, by the way.
No, it's super great. Yeah. I'm all about it. I think that, and it's like when you're from a particular country and your soccer team wins the World Cup, like if you're from Argentina, and shout out to Argentina, your team wins the World Cup, and it doesn't even matter if you don't watch football, you're still really happy, right? If you're a Korean right now, you're stoked that K-pop is everywhere, I would imagine. And one thing that I think is really interesting about K-pop, so just to kind of transition the conversation in this direction, because I think this is super interesting. But like, if you really analyze what they're doing musically, it is kind of what you said, like they're attenuating everything perfectly so that it appeals to our instinctive response, like in music. Bass sits in a particular way, the synths or the vocal arrangements, whatever, it's all done in a particular way to kind of be correct, right? And I think that if you were to equate musically what they're doing, it's kind of like it's like some 90s R&B mixed with some trap, mixed with some like mainstream pop. I don't know, but you could almost say that it's conventional. It's got this conventional sort of aspect to it. and it's done over the top in terms of like observing the conventions of whatever genre of music they're trying to reproduce, you know?
Right.
And in a way, what I think is interesting about that is like it shows something about like Korean culture, right? In terms of like how they pursue, you know, the things that they do in terms of like observing and upholding conventions. Whereas in the United States and maybe in like other, you know, the Western world, something that we value about music is almost like the disruption of conventions. You know what I mean? Like that somebody does something in a particular way and like, oh, this person did it differently. Great. Now that's the thing, right? Whereas K-pop in a way is just like, no. We're not going to do something necessarily differently. We're going to do it, but on steroids. We're going to do it bigger than you guys have ever done.
Yeah, they did like 100 times Max Martin.
Right.
And they got like a team of people that makes the Mickey Mouse house or whatever it was called, Mickey Mouse Club.
Uh-huh.
Remember all the like Aguilera
totally.
and it makes them look like a tiny shack because they got a whole stable of people and they groom them from like 11 years old or 12-year-old, and they decided we're gonna be perfect and we're gonna do this exactly perfect.
Right, and you hear that like I've for that reason I've kind of listened to other genres of Korean music, and not just Korean music, but like music being played by Koreans. It might be genre specific to something else, but you listen to Korean classical musicians. And they're just like so on point, You listen to when Koreans do like neo soul, it's so on point. It's never not on point.
That is something I've actually noticed a lot, right? Different cultures have just so like in most Middle Eastern music, right? I would say Arabic music, certainly Israelis music. There's not a belief that you should be recreating an event of the past in some perfect modality. And then some countries do have the notion that the objective is perfection. And I do think I watched what was it, Blackpink?
Yeah.
I forgot which one. What do you want? That I can't remember it. But that one.
Think about that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
and I listened to that 100 times at least.
Yeah.
Like at least 20 times on repeat because I was like, it reminded me of like McDonald's, right? Because it's like perfectly crafted,
right?
Just the right length. And I sat down and I measured like how long was this section? How long was this section? How long did they approach this? And it was exceptionally well done.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. I mean so it's a really interesting point because it's like a different sort of approach to the same thing almost, which is like creating that moment that you want to create together. Like the same thing that you were talking about when you play bass in front of, just a few people and you get that feeling. It's like that feeling is the same thing that in this multi-million-dollar corporate context they're reproducing, but they're doing it on this huge level where they've probably like compartmentalized all the different responsibilities. Like there's a team of songwriters and there's a team of, musicians that are demoing out and sketching out these different ideas. And then there's a choreographer that's deciding, okay, if they step to the right on beat 3, that's going to make us this many dollars,
Yeah.
And they're like crafting it with that moment in mind. Like how do we create that moment in the highest impact way?
Right, that's an extreme, right? That's do you mind if I?
But couldn't?
Yeah.
Oh, so go ahead.
I was going to talk about the other extreme, but
Yeah,
go ahead.
What's the other extreme?
All right, there's this guy. He was I please forget. I won't pronounce it. I think it's Karush. He was this Iranian guy, and he lived in there before the Shah had come in and basically said no more music. No, at the end of the Shah. Sorry, the current thing. He said no more music. But he had this maybe 5 or 6 year career in his very early years where he made music in Iran. And it was just, like anybody in their first 5 years, it's going to sound rudimentary and stuff. The guy couldn't play live in his country for 30 years until somebody accidentally put him on the television. And then people started listening to his music.
Accidentally went live before we were actually. And somebody was just like, "Is this the right cable that plugs into here?" And they were, this guy's live. He's not supposed to be here. Now we're gonna, be persecuted by the government. But anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
So when you listen to his stuff, there is no math, no psychology. This is a guy who's been playing alone for 30 years, just in his privacy or in hidden parties. And finally, you get to hear some of the albums that he came in, and it's that opposite. But I love it a lot. I love all the imperfection. I love the flaws. I love that he was bound to where he lived and when.
Yeah. I know what you mean. And I think that ethic exists somewhere in our psyche, in part because we're brought up in a musical tradition that has the folkloric element really embedded into it. You know, like we're in our musical tastes, and I don't know specifically what your musical tastes are, but I know that you play jazz and folk. You mentioned jazz and folk when we were talking earlier, right? And like so both of those are essentially folkloric music. You know what I mean? They're essentially some kind of music that is played not even really to be, it's emergent, right? It's like you play the idea of a song, and then, okay, people know what song you're playing, and they just join you, and it's improvised. It's kind of like happening in the moment. And like, because that's such a big part of our musical tradition, a lot of the evolution of it really has to do with the imperfections. And it has to do with like I tried this note, and this note doesn't really go in this context, but I'm playing it anyway because I want to make it my expression. You know what I mean? I want to make my version of this that now includes the flat 13th.
Sure.
You know? And so on the other hand, if you were perhaps brought up in a different context, and what you valued, in an intuitive sense, were perfection, then that wouldn't necessarily be what stimulated your palate or whatever. You know what I mean? It wouldn't be what your musical comparisons are happening like on a deep psychological level.
Yeah, I've always been surprised. Like they're classical musicians, for example, right? They're so unbelievably talented. So many of them. But if you ask them to just go slightly out of what that norm is that they have expected of themselves, it's like they're speaking another language,
right?
Because they're living in this world where there's a utopia, and we're aiming for utopia, and we're aiming for, this is going to be the best performance of Mussorgsky's pictures at an exhibition or whatever, right? And that's a way of thinking about the world, and I think there's a lot of merit to it. And then there's the other way, which is like, things are dirty. Like punk.
Right.
Punk people are musicians.
100%. Yes, totally.
Yeah, yes.
And you would even, or some people would say, punk musicians aren't real musicians. Like, no, of course they are. Of course they are. And like what they do is, in fact, a lot more difficult than people give it credit for. Because I think that, that the way, like, there's so much in the way that the music is performed that you cannot replicate just right off the bat. You have to have some sort of passion that just can't be faked. You have to have a way of playing that can't be faked. You have to imagine trying to be a punk vocalist, and you've been trained for opera or jazz.
Right.
And it's not that the training would detract from your ability to do that, but it's like, once you're trying to do punk, you're going to really have to have it come from a different place than everything that you've learned. And yet there are some people that might just step on a stage and right away they are punk. You know what I mean? I think that the same thing about hip hop, actually, like
what?
Rapping. I mean, because rapping is in itself a very technical skill, or I don't know if technical is the right word, but it's something that you have to, you can't do it without practicing it. You know what I mean? Like you have to really I'd be ignorant if I tried to say what you have to be able to do, because I don't know how to practice doing hip hop. But I'd imagine you have to practice freestyling, and you have to practice like creating word associations, like what words rhyme with each other, and have this kind of like list going on in your head. I don't know. Maybe you have to rap to a metronome, so you always like get good at keeping time or something. I don't know, but those things come to mind as possibilities. But you can't just like be a rapper because you rap good. You kind of also have to like be a rapper. You know what I mean? You have to like have that, you have to have that lifestyle or that perspective or that way of interacting with the world that is like really baked in the culture of hip hop in order for anybody to take you seriously while you do it. Same with punk. I mean, you have to really show up and like, you know, and it's not even about like being aggressive or having a bunch of tattoos or being vegan or being really extreme in your political beliefs. It's none of that. It's just like really like how you carry yourself has to be embedded in your whole like persona in order for you to be taken seriously as a punk singer, you know?
Well, in the case of rap, like again, I don't know how to rap, and so I can't speak to the specifics, but what I can seem to be able to gather is that, you know, like people do yoga to get out of their mind, right? They want to free space in their head so that the only thing that they see is the moment that they're in now and like the next few moments. And I think that's a lifetime endeavor. And when I hear a great rapper, that's what I'm hearing. A person who's like consciously unconscious.
Right.
And the words that come to them are outside of their control, but they have this faith that that next word is going to come.
Right.
And that's a way of living. So I don't think you can fake it. And I don't think that you can only do it sometimes. So I agree.
Right. And it's very comparable to, I think, you know, when you hear a really amazing jazz player or maybe a player in any medium, like any music, that's able to speak as a persona with their instrument. You know, like actually the event that you came to here at Ashby Arts,
Yeah.
In the other day, where we had Balkan music, and
Very
it was
good.
the Balkan Bacchanal with Peter Bonos, right? And the musicians that were playing were speaking to each other in this language that they all clearly understood really perfectly. And I understood like in terms of maybe what time signature they were in and what the chord progressions were, but I couldn't, you know, I could not speak with my instrument. I could not play guitar in that fashion, not because I don't have the technical proficiency to do it, but because I don't know that language. And I could hear that they knew that language to such a degree that there was nothing conscious about what they were doing, but it was everything zoned in on that moment.
Right.
And it was kind of like the perfect shout out to Peter Bonos, because I think he's a genius, a musical genius. Now I came to realize through that. And so were a lot of the people that were playing at that thing.
No, he was great, and he had a great band, and they were all very polite and nice too.
Yeah, they were all nice people. Yeah, but I you know, because some musicians are assholes. Let's put it that way.
They were all nice.
They were all really nice.
And they but from what I understood, a lot of them were Turkish, right?
Turkish, yeah.
And in Turkey, there's this culture, right? I have had friends who went to Turkey to learn the drum beats, and they have their drum beats, and they gain a shared language. And yeah, and if you're on the outside, it's not obvious that there's a common language between these people. Mm-hmm. But when they can hear each other, you know, it's beautiful, especially Balkan music.
Yeah,
it gets you dancing. It makes you feel positive.
It does, and I felt like, you know, it had this commonality with jazz, and I think it had this commonality with what I might ignorantly call classical music, but which at its inception was also a music that was played with improvisation and exchange back and forth of linguistic, you know, idioms or whatever, not necessarily charted out notes and preconceived, right?
Right.
Like classical music at some point did have that component to it. And I don't know. Now I think, I don't know what I think. I think that I don't know. About
the too much rudimentary in classic, or would you like to see more improvisational classic?
No, I don't even want to.
I would like to see that. I want to see way more. I like Evgeny Kissin, and I like him and I liked Glenn Gould. Yeah, Glenn Gould, right? Because they did something that was at least different than what everybody had done from them.
Right.
And still played the right notes.
Yeah. Totally. All right. Well, listen. We're here at Ashby Art Space in Berkeley, California. This is a venue that has yet to officially open, but we are throwing shows and different kinds of events. We have comedy tomorrow night, Laughs on Ashby on Friday, February 25th. Shout out to Tito Alberto. Tito Comedy he is on the gram, as they say. We have Agua Pura, which is performing here on March 13th. Yes, March 13th. An all-female salsa band that absolutely kills it.
Nice.
We have March 12th. We have poetry, the second edition of the Poetry Slam that is hopefully going to become a monthly endeavor here. On March 19th, we're going to have Fanfare Zambaleta, which is another iteration of the Balkan event that we were just talking about, headed by Peter Bonos. And what do you have coming up? Do you want to tell everybody about what you have coming up?
Nothing coming up. COVID killed my bands, so we're just coming back to life. But soon, and hopefully we'll come down and play down at Ashby Art Space. I think it's a cool spot. It's local. There's a lot of people out here who like music. It's positive attitude. I came last time.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed myself.
Yeah, totally. Well, anyways, this has been an awesome iteration of the MI101 podcast. You see, we're not too serious, but we every so often, we talk about cool stuff. And I want to just give one more plug. I gave this plug last week, but I want to give it again. Julio Xavier Cheto has a GoFundMe campaign that is up because he suffered a pretty serious knife injury. Not anything like he was assaulted by somebody, but it was a dishwashing accident, if you can believe that. But he actually severed a nerve, and he is a bass player, and having one of the nerves that controls his fingers is absolutely devastating to his career. Plus, he just had a baby that was born a couple of weeks after that injury happened. So he's in a apparently 3-year-long recovery process from that surgery. And so any help that he can get from the community is really important. Just go look up Julio Xavier Cheto. He goes by The Jazz Thug on Instagram. He's probably one of the best bass players that I've ever met. And I think that everybody in the community should really support him. I want to give another plug for another bass player's GoFundMe campaign. His name is Cornelius Mims. And he actually is the program director for the Roderick D. Jones Foundation that's based in LA. They give music instruction and coaching and tutelage to really prime talent, young talent in the LA area. Also, they're working with a couple of Bay Area-based musicians, young musicians. And he suffered actually a completely different thing. Within 1 week of each other, his father and his daughter passed away. Within 1 week of each other. It's unthinkable.
That is horrible.
And so I'm pretty close to him, and I think that he's one of the most amazing people and an OG bass player. He played on Michael Jackson's Bad.
No kidding.
Yes, he did. He's played with Gladys Knight. He's played with Phil Collins. He's played with Tupac. He played with I don't even want to go through his whole resume because that's not the point. The point is just he needs people's help to cover some of the costs associated with these things he's had to go through. And I just think all around, supporting him would be a great thing to do. So check him out. He is BombBass1014 on Instagram. And the GoFundMe link is in his bio. So yeah, support bass players right now. You got the Jazz Thug on Instagram. You have BombBass1014 on Instagram. Both of them have very relevant GoFundMe campaigns that they could do a lot with your support. Ashby Art Space also has a GoFundMe campaign. And I mentioned that because the costs of opening this place, doing the interior construction, the permitting, throwing these shows, making sure our website's on point, making sure we can keep this podcast coming to you. All of those things are helped by a GoFundMe campaign, which is gofundme.com/let's-open-ashby-arts-space. Go type that into your URL and see what you find. All right. Thank you very much. And Canuto, thank you for doing the switching today.
Hey, man, no problem.
All right.
It's been a pleasure.
And if you remember how to click on that intro thing in OBS, you just click intro, and then we're going to cut this live stream right now.
Thanks for having me.